The scent of lemon polish and ammonia was the only thing that felt real. It clung to the dark blue fabric of my uniform, a cheap shield against the world contained within the top 3 floors of the Tanaka Tower. Here, the air itself was different, thin and cold, smelling of money and something else. Something sharp and metallic, like old blood soaked into the foundation. I kept my head down, my movements small and efficient as I wiped down the impossibly long obsidian table in the main boardroom. It was my last room of the night, the one I always saved for when the building was quietest. But tonight was not quiet. They were still here. The men in suits that cost more than my entire year of college tuition. They sat around the table I was trying to polish, their voices a low, guttural murmur of Japanese I'd spent 2 years of scholarships and late-night study sessions learning to understand. My job was to be invisible. A ghost in a cleaner's dress and a starched white apron, emptying wastebaskets and erasing the smudges left by powerful hands. My focus was on a single, stubborn fingerprint marring the perfect black surface when a chair scraped back. I didn't look up, but I felt the shift in the room's gravity. The murmurs ceased. The air became heavy, charged with a silence that was louder than any conversation. He moved like the room owed him space. I knew who it was without seeing his face. Ria Tanaka. The man whose name was whispered in fear and reverence from the boardrooms of Shinjuku to the darkest alleys of the city. I'd only seen him in glimpses, the severe cut of a Tom Ford suit, the glint of a platinum watch, the way everyone else in his orbit seemed to shrink when he entered a room. His shoes, handmade Italian leather, stopped a few feet from me. I could smell his cologne, a subtle, arresting scent of sandalwood and smoke. I kept my eyes fixed on the whorls of the fingerprint on the table, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. Be invisible. Be silent. Be nothing. The translator is late, a voice said, tight with anxiety. It belonged to a man named Kenji, one of Tanaka's lieutenants. He is not late, another voice countered, this one smooth and cold as river stone. Tanaka's voice. He is not coming. A nervous beat of silence. I risked a glance upward, just for a second, from beneath my lashes. Ria Tanaka was standing at the head of the table, his back to the panoramic window that overlooked the glittering, electric sprawl of Tokyo. He was all sharp lines and coiled stillness. Tattoos, intricate gray and black dragons, coiled up from his collar and peeked from the cuffs of his crisp white shirt. His eyes, the color of wet obsidian, scanned the faces of his men, and then, inexplicably, they landed on me. I froze, my hand hovering over the table. The rag suddenly felt heavy alien. His gaze wasn't angry or dismissive. It was analytical. A predator assessing an unexpected variable in its territory. The deal cannot wait, Kenji pressed, his voice strained. The Kimura clan will see it as an insult. Tanaka's eyes didn't leave mine. A thin, white scar bisected his left eyebrow, the only imperfection on a face that seemed carved from granite. We have no one who can handle the nuances of the legal framework. Their man is a shark. I should have looked away. I should have shrunk back into my role as the silent, insignificant cleaner. But I was 18, exhausted from a midterm I'd studied all night for, and running on nothing but cheap coffee and desperation. And in that moment, his stare felt like a challenge. My jaw tightened. I knew legal Japanese. I'd aced it. The knowledge was useless, of course, a line on a resume that meant nothing in the real world, but I had it. That was when she made the mistake of looking up. My brief defiance was all it took. A flicker of something, amusement? Curiosity, crossed his face. It was a chilling sight. He took a step toward me. You, he said, the single English word cutting through the Japanese in the room. You've been working here for 6 months. You are always here when we are. You hear everything. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. My blood went cold. I don't understand, I stammered in my most polite, deferential Japanese, bowing my head slightly. I just clean, sir. He let out a short, humorless laugh. It was a terrifying sound. You are a student at Waseda. Full scholarship. Majoring in international law with a focus on East Asian trade agreements. The room was utterly still. My carefully constructed invisibility shattered into a million pieces. How did he know that? My employment file contained my name, Zara Adebayo, and a fake address. Nothing more. You hide it well, he continued, circling me slowly, his presence an oppressive weight. But your eyes are too sharp for a simple maid. You watch. You listen. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to crane my neck to look up at him. The last translator we had was a fool who mistook a clause about liability for one about assets. It cost me a fortune. I do not suffer fools. He gestured to the empty chair beside him, a seat of honor that was now a place of execution. The Kimura contract is on the tablet. Their representative will be here in 5 minutes, his lips curved into a smirk that held no warmth, only predatory confidence. If you're so smart, then translate it. My mind screamed. Run. Say no. Faint. But I was pinned by the collective stare of a dozen of the most dangerous men in Tokyo, and by the absolute, unshakable certainty in Ria Tanaka's eyes. Saying no wasn't an option. It never had been. My legs moved on their own, stiff and robotic. I slipped into the supple leather chair, my rough cleaner's dress a jarring contrast to the luxury around me. The heavy tablet was pushed in front of me. Its screen glowed with dense, complex characters. A multi-million-dollar deal that would reshape the balance of power in the city's underworld. And he was trusting it to the maid. Or he was testing me. A test where failure meant something far worse than a bad grade. The doors opened. A group of men, equally well-dressed, but with a different, more volatile energy, entered the room. Their leader, a silver-haired man with a cruel mouth, took his seat opposite Tanaka. He gave me a dismissive glance and began to speak, his Japanese fast and laden with honorifics designed to establish dominance. My throat was dry, but I found my voice. I began to translate, my tone even and professional, the years of practice taking over. I moved from their words to Tanaka's, a bridge between two titans. The legal jargon was dense, but I navigated it. For the first 20 minutes, it was straightforward. Asset transfers, territory delineations, profit-sharing agreements. I could feel Tanaka's eyes on me, watching, judging every syllable. Then I reached Section 4. Subclause B. My breath hitched. I read it again. And a third time. It was subtle, buried under layers of corporate speak and cross-references to other articles. A single character, easily missed. A modification that changed the entire meaning of the paragraph. It wasn't a transfer of assets. It was a forfeiture. Under the guise of a partnership, the Kimura clan was legally stripping Tanaka of his most profitable shipping lane and making it look like a gift. It was a declaration of war hidden in plain sight. A trap. I lifted my head, my eyes finding Tanaka's. The smug look on the Kimura boss's face told me everything. He thought he had won. He thought Tanaka's new translator was just some girl, easily fooled. The room waited. The air was thick with unspoken threats. Tanaka's expression was unreadable, but I saw the slight tension in his jaw. He was waiting for my translation of the Kimura boss's latest platitude. Instead, I spoke the truth. He says, I began, my voice clear and steady, that he is grateful for this partnership. I paused, then looked directly at the Kimura boss. I switched to flawless, formal Japanese. However, Section 4, Subclause B, outlines a complete forfeiture of the southern shipping route, effective upon signing. It does not outline a partnership. It outlines a surrender. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical thing, pressing in on my ears. The Kimura boss's face went from smug, to confused, to pale with fury. Kenji and the other lieutenants slowly, deliberately, placed their hands on the table, near the weapons I knew were concealed beneath their jackets. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Ria Tanaka. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes were fixed on me. The amusement was gone. The casual cruelty was gone. In its place was a look of shocked, lethal intensity. He hadn't been testing me. He had been cornered and had taken a wild, desperate gamble. And I had just handed him a knife. The Kimura delegation was escorted from the room. The word escorted was a kindness, They were dragged, their protests silenced by the cold muzzles of guns pressed to their backs. The deal was dead. A war had likely just begun. And I was at the epicenter of it all. When the boardroom doors closed, leaving only Tanaka and his inner circle, the silence returned, heavier than before. I was still sitting in the translator's chair, my hands clasped in my lap to stop them from shaking. I was no longer Zara the cleaner. I was a witness. A liability. An asset. I didn't know which was more dangerous. Ryo Tanaka rose from his chair and walked to the window, staring out at the city he ruled. "You will come with me," he said, not looking back. It wasn't a request. I was taken not to an interrogation room or a cold basement, but to the penthouse suite that occupied the entire top floor. It was a world of minimalist luxury, polished concrete floors, vast expanses of glass, priceless art that served as stark punctuation marks in the empty space. It was beautiful and sterile. A cage made of gold and steel. 2 guards were posted outside my door. My phone was taken. My old life, my classes, my tiny apartment, my future, all of it was severed in a single, silent command. I was his now. His problem to solve. Days bled into a week. I was given clothes, simple, expensive silks and cashmeres in shades of gray and black. I ate meals served by silent staff. I was a prisoner in a palace, and the warden was a ghost. Ryo Tanaka was a constant, unseen presence. I felt his influence in the way the guards watched me, in the quality of the food, in the absolute isolation. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the main living area. The city lights were a river of diamonds below. A single lamp was on, illuminating a desk of dark, polished wood. On it, propped against a stack of books, was a small, silver-framed photograph. I shouldn't have looked. But I was starving for any piece of humanity in this cold, perfect place. I picked it up. It was a picture of a much younger Ryo, perhaps my age, his expression unguarded, almost soft. Beside him was a young woman with a brilliant, laughing smile. She looked at him with an adoration that was painful to see. Her name was Akari. I jumped, dropping the frame. It clattered onto the desk. Ryo stood in the shadows of the doorway, dressed in a simple black shirt and trousers, the sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms covered in the intricate ink of his tattoos. He made no move to retrieve the photo. "She was my sister," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. But his eyes were fixed on the picture, and in their depths, I saw the ghost of a wound that had never healed. She trusted the wrong man. A man I brought into our family. He used her to get to me. A betrayal wrapped in a promise. He looked at me then, and I understood. The Kimura contract wasn't just business. It was history repeating itself. He saw the same pattern, the same kind of treachery that had cost him his sister. That was his vulnerability. The one person he had failed to protect. "You saw the lie," he said, stepping into the light. "Why?" "The kanji for transfer was replaced with the one for seed," I said, my voice barely a whisper. It was a deliberate deception. Many would have missed it. "I've spent my life looking for the details people miss," I answered, thinking of the hidden fees in student loan documents, the fine print on rental agreements. It's how you survive when you have nothing else. That was the first time he looked at me, and I felt like he saw something more than a tool. A flicker of respect, perhaps. It was a dangerous feeling. The danger escalated 2 nights later. I was reading by the window when the glass beside my head exploded inward. I threw myself to the floor as a second shot punched a hole in the wall where I'd been sitting. A sniper. From an adjacent building. Before I could even process the fear, Ryo was there. He moved with a silent, lethal grace, pulling me from the floor and dragging me behind a thick concrete pillar. His body shielded mine, his arms a cage of steel around me. I could feel the heat of him, the hard beat of his heart against my back. "They know you're here," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "They're not just hunting me anymore. They're hunting you." The attack was repelled by his men, a swift, brutal response that I heard but did not see. In the chaotic aftermath, as guards swept the penthouse, I saw my chance. An open service door, a path to the stairwell, a way out. Freedom. I took a step toward it. Ryo was across the room, giving sharp commands in Japanese, his back to me. He was distracted. I could be gone. But then I saw it. A dark stain spreading across the side of his white shirt. He was bleeding. Shrapnel from the window. He was hiding it, his posture rigid with control, but he was hurt. I looked from the open door to the man who had stolen my life. He was a monster, a king in a violent, merciless world. But he was injured because of me. In that moment, the choice was simple. I couldn't run. I walked back to him, my steps sure. I grabbed a clean napkin from the bar and pressed it firmly against his side. "You're bleeding," I said, my voice low. He flinched, his eyes wide with surprise. He hadn't realized I was still there. He looked from my face, to my hand on his side, to the open door I had just turned my back on. The silence between us stretched, filled with the things we couldn't say. He reached up, his fingers gently brushing a stray piece of glass from my hair. The touch was featherlight, almost deniable, but it sent a jolt through me. A charged moment of shared survival that was more intimate than any kiss. That was the moment everything changed. I had made a deliberate choice to stay. The war with the Kimura clan was no longer a cold one. It was hot, and I was at its center. Rhea kept me close, moving us to a more secure safe house, a traditional home surrounded by high walls and a tranquil garden that belied the tension within. He needed to strike back, but he was blind. The Kimura boss was insulated. "We need to know his next move," Rhea said one evening, pacing the tatami-matted room. "We need someone on the inside." "They're not going to let any of your men near them," I said, looking up from the book I was pretending to read. His dark eyes settled on me. "No, not my men." An hour later, the plan was laid out. The Kimura boss had a weakness, a fondness for acquiring rare European art. A shell corporation, a faked auction, a specific painting he'd been hunting for years. And a phone call from the gallery representative to finalize the private sale. A representative with a flawless, unaccented English tongue and a deep knowledge of 18th century art. A role only I could play. "You want me to lie to him," I said, my voice flat. "To lure him to a location. I want you to give him the information he needs to walk into a trap," Rhea corrected, his tone devoid of apology. It was a line. A clear, bright line between being a victim of circumstance and being a willing participant. The girl who scrubbed floors and studied for exams would never do this. But that girl was gone. I thought of the bullet hole in the wall next to my head. I thought of the way Rhea had shielded me with his own body. "I'll do it," I said. The call was the longest 5 minutes of my life. I sat at a desk with a burner phone, Rhea standing behind me, his presence a heavy weight. I channeled every bit of my academic knowledge, every ounce of feigned confidence I could muster. I described the painting's provenance, debated brushstrokes, and negotiated a price with a man whose death I was arranging. And he believed me. He believed every word. When I hung up, the silence in the room was deafening. I felt sick. I had just condemned a man to die. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I stood up, my legs trembling, and walked to the veranda overlooking the garden. The night air was cool, but I felt like I was burning from the inside out. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold the pieces of my old morality together. He came to stand beside me, not touching. For a long time, he just stood there, watching the koi swim in the pond below. "I never should have involved you," he said, his voice a low rumble. It was the closest he'd ever come to an apology. I didn't answer. "I told myself keeping you here was for your own safety." A logical precaution. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. I was lying to myself. My breath caught. This felt more dangerous than the sniper, more terrifying than the phone call. "Now that you're in this world," he continued, his gaze intense, "I find I do not want to let you go." It wasn't a declaration of love. It was a confession of possession. A claim. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. And the most frightening part was, I didn't want him to. The trap worked. The Kimura boss was eliminated. But victory in this world is always fleeting. His son, a man named Kenta, took over. And Kenta was smarter, more ruthless, and he knew exactly how to hurt Rhea. He didn't target his businesses or his soldiers. He targeted me. A package arrived. Inside was a single photo. It was of my younger brother, smiling on his college campus back in the States. Pinned to the photo was a note. A debt must be paid in blood. Brother for brother. Or her for yours. The final confrontation was inevitable. Kenta proposed a meeting. A trade. Me for a truce. Ria knew it was a trap. I knew it was a trap. Kenta wanted to kill us both, to wipe the board clean. I will not trade you, Ria said, his voice absolute. He was planning an assault, a full-scale war in the heart of the city. Your plan won't work, I told him, looking over the blueprints of the meeting place, a deserted warehouse complex by the docks. He's expecting a frontal assault. He'll have you pinned down. But he's not expecting me. I pointed to a secondary access point, a maintenance channel for the water system. I know these kinds of buildings. The service routes. I can get inside. Create a diversion. No. It's too dangerous. It's more dangerous to let him control the narrative, I argued, meeting his hard stare with one of my own. He thinks I'm your weakness. Let's use that. He fought it. But he saw the logic in my plan. He saw the fire in my eyes. He was a tactician, and my plan was tactically sound. Reluctantly, he agreed. The climax was a symphony of controlled chaos. As Ria's men engaged Kenta's forces at the main entrance, I slipped through the dark, damp maintenance tunnels. I emerged inside the main warehouse, hidden in the rafters above the main floor. Kenta was there, holding Ryu at gunpoint, gloating. He had sprung his trap perfectly. From my vantage point, I saw the sniper Kenta had hidden, the one meant to finish Ryu once I was revealed. Using the Japanese I'd learned from overhearing his guards, I spoke into the radio I'd taken. Target compromised. Northern roof. Go now. Kenta's sniper, hearing the command, turned his attention away from Ryu for a fatal second. It was all the opening Ryu needed. The world exploded in motion and sound. I didn't watch the violence. I watched him. He moved through it like it was a language he was born speaking, precise, economical, and utterly lethal. I was never a damsel to be rescued. I was the architect of his victory. In the aftermath, amidst the smell of cordite and the quiet groans of the wounded, Ryu found me. He was unhurt. He walked toward me, his steps sure, his eyes never leaving mine. He stopped in front of me, reaching out to cup my face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the grime from my cheek. He didn't thank me. He didn't say he loved me. He said something more. You are not a debt, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You are not a soldier, his eyes bored into mine, making an oath. You are mine. My territory. And I protect what is mine. It was a promise, a brand, a declaration of a war he would fight for the rest of his life. For me, the cost was absolute. My old life was a ghost. My scholarship, my degree, my family, they existed in a world I could no longer touch. The price for staying, for surviving, was the woman I was supposed to be. We stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the one where a bullet had once tried to claim me. Tokyo glittered below, a sea of captured stars. The city was his empire, and I was its unwilling, undeniable queen. He came to stand behind me, his presence a familiar heat at my back. He didn't touch me, but I could feel his gaze on me in the reflection in the dark glass. I saw a woman I barely recognized, her eyes older, harder. A survivor. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a simple gesture of possession, of finality. This time, I did not flinch. I had made my choice, and I would not look back.